So what if the reason you can't meditate has absolutely nothing to do with your mind?
Right, like zero to do with your actual brain.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it actually has everything to do with a 2 millimeter piece of skin covering your eyes.
It sounds completely counterintuitive, you know? I mean, we are just so conditioned to think of meditation as this purely mental exercise.
Yeah, like a battle of willpower inside your skull.
Exactly. We treat it like it's a software problem, right? You download the app, you sit on the fancy ergonomic cushion.
Oh, yeah, the $50 cushion.
Right. And you just try to forcefully uninstall your own anxiety by thinking really hard about not thinking.
Which is, for most people anyway, a spectacular failure.
Oh, completely.
You sit there trying to clear your mind, and suddenly you're, I don't know, agonizing over some awkward conversation you had back in 2018.
Or making a grocery list.
Yeah, making a grocery list. Or worse, you just fall straight asleep.
Which then leads to this pervasive cultural guilt. People assume their brain is just fundamentally broken.
Right, like they just lack the spiritual discipline that all these wellness gurus seem to have effortlessly.
Yeah, they think the software is corrupted. But today, we're taking a radically different approach.
Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. We are throwing out the software manual completely today. We're looking at the tangible biological hardware.
The literal physical mechanics of human concentration.
And we are being guided by a source that completely upends the conventional wisdom of the wellness industry.
Yeah, we are pulling from a highly detailed transcript of a lecture by this incredibly fascinating figure. His name is Osman, though he's widely known as the blind Muslim yogi.
Right.
And he's an energy healer, an entrepreneur, and a teacher who brings an astonishing data set to this conversation.
The numbers attached to his career are really what immediately caught my attention, because the material details a teaching tenure spanning from 1981 all the way to 2025.
It's massive. That is 44 years of continuous instruction.
Almost 5 decades, really, if you count his own practice
Yeah.
starting even earlier.
Exactly. 4.5 decades of field research, essentially. He has taught thousands of students across, I think it said more than 100 countries.
Yeah, over 100 countries.
Right. And when someone observes the human nervous system across that many different cultures, climates, belief systems, they're forced to strip away the fluff.
The cultural baggage.
Yeah, exactly. They have to find the biological bedrock,
Real-
what actually works for the human animal, regardless of their background.
And what he found is that in a world that is just obsessed with this abstract concept of, clearing the mind, the actual secret to entering a profound meditative state is shockingly mechanical.
It's all physical. It comes down to the precise physical geometry of your eyelids.
Eyelids, it completely strips away the mysticism and replaces it with physiology.
Well, the visual cortex is the most power-hungry processing center in the human brain, right?
Well, right.
So modulating the light, and especially the muscular tension around the eyes, is literally the most direct way to hack the central nervous system.
I want to give you, the listener, an analogy to hold on to as we navigate this, because it really reframes the whole goal. Stop thinking of meditation as some ethereal voyage into the cosmos.
Oh, please do.
Right. Frame it like you're sitting in the driver's seat of a manual transmission car, and you are trying to learn how to drive a stick shift for the very first time.
Which is notoriously frustrating for anyone who's actually been there.
Totally.
You're right.
Sweating, stalling. When most people try to meditate, they are basically stomping on the gas pedal of their concentration.
Yeah.
They're aggressively trying to force the car into gear. They're grinding the gears of their brain. The engine stalls. They get frustrated. And eventually they just, throw their hands up and walk away.
Because they don't have the mechanical disconnect required to shift the state of the vehicle smoothly.
Exactly. And the reason they're grinding the gears is simply that no one ever pointed out where the clutch is.
Right.
Today, through Osman's decades of trial and error, we're going to show you exactly where that clutch is. But to understand how to operate it, we first have to look at how a master teacher separates his public curriculum from his private reality.
Oh, this part is so fascinating. The source material reveals this massive discrepancy between what Osman tells his thousands of beginners to do and what he actually does himself behind closed doors.
It's the classic practitioner's paradox, right?
Exactly. He openly states that the method he recommends for the general public, which yields massive positive results, by the way, is a method that he personally dislikes.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he finds absolutely zero intrinsic value in it for his own personal practice.
So if I'm listening to this, my immediate reaction is, hold on a second. Why would I just copy the master?
Right, skip to the end.
Yeah, because if someone with all this experience has a secret personal routine, I want that routine. I want the shortcut to the master-level results.
It is the ultimate temptation. We all want the advanced protocol immediately. But this discrepancy really highlights a profound maturity in how he views mental development.
How so?
Well, he understands that neurological infrastructure has to be built sequentially. You cannot just take a nervous system that is completely habituated to the chaotic stimuli of modern life phones, traffic, emails, and drop it into a highly advanced, nuanced physiological trigger.
Oh, I see. It would be like a first-time gym goer walking in, like trying to deadlift 500 pounds just because they saw a pro powerlifter do it.
That is the perfect analogy. The powerlifter has spent a decade building the bone density, the central nervous system pathways, the micromusculature to support that weight.
And if the beginner tries it, they don't get stronger. They just snap their spine.
Exactly. So the method Osman teaches to beginners, which is a very standard, safe, closed-eye mindfulness practice, it acts as the foundational conditioning. It builds the basic circuitry of attention.
So he recommends it objectively because the scientific literature and his own decades of teaching prove that it works safely for the vast majority of the population.
Yes, he is incredibly pragmatic about it. He separates his own subjective preference from objective utility. He doesn't let his ego dictate the curriculum.
And that pragmatism is what makes his personal advanced method so intriguing to me. Because to appreciate the subtle genius of what he actually does, we have to travel with him to the absolute extremes of meditative practice first.
Right. The two polar opposites he experimented with over the years.
Which brings us to the first extreme. And this is going to sound completely backwards to anyone who relies on a meditation app before bed. We are talking about meditating with your eyes wide open.
The open eye approach. Yeah, the source text notes that Osman found immense value in this early on in his journey.
He specifically points to the techniques used by the Brahma Kumari organization.
He does, and he
Yeah.
clarifies he has no financial affiliation with them at all, but he praises their method for being highly pragmatic, scientifically grounded, and accessible.
It's like accessible to anyone without forcing them to compromise their own personal religious beliefs.
Exactly. And he credits this specific open eye method with giving him a massive leap forward in his early development.
He describes it as yielding substantive daily progress.
Progress so foundational that he feels he's actually still building upon it today, even though he abandoned the actual open eye technique years ago.
Okay, I have to hit the pause button right here because we cannot gloss over a massive elephant in the room based on the source material.
Oh, right. The blindness.
Yeah. In the very beginning, he is introduced as the blind Muslim yogi. And now we are talking about how keeping his eyes wide open to look at the room gave him a massive leap forward. How on earth does a visual anchor work for someone who is functionally blind?
It is the crucial question, and it requires us to really understand the physiological spectrum of both blindness and human perception.
Okay.
Because blindness is very rarely a binary state of absolute pitch black nothingness.
Oh, really? I think most people assume it's just like turning off a TV screen.
Right, but the vast majority of people who are legally or functionally blind still possess some degree of light perception, shadow detection, or maybe peripheral awareness.
So the visual cortex is still receiving some kind of data, even if it's not a high-definition image of a chair or a wall.
Exactly. Furthermore, and this is where the mechanics of meditation becomes so fascinating, the anchor of the open eye isn't just about the optic nerve transmitting an image.
What else is it doing?
It is heavily reliant on proprioception.
Proprioception, meaning the body's ability to sense its own position in space, right?
Yes. Your brain is constantly monitoring the tension in the extraocular muscles. Those are the tiny muscles that control the movement and the opening of the eye.
Okay.
When you physically hold your eyelids open and direct your face forward, your brain registers that muscular tension. It receives the mechanical data that says, hey, we are alert, we are facing outward, we are engaging with the external environment.
Wow. So even without perfect visual acuity, the physical act of just holding the eyes open anchors the brain to the present physical reality.
Yes. It stops the mind from retreating entirely into its own internal void.
Think about the alternative, right? When you eliminate all external input, the brain, which is basically a voracious prediction machine, it panics.
It needs data to process.
Exactly. If you don't give it data from the room, it's going to manufacture data from your memories and your anxieties.
That is so true.
Instead of the training wheels analogy we used earlier, let's think about it like leaving a radio playing softly in the living room of an empty house.
Okay, I like that.
The open eye method is that radio. The constant low-level stream of sensory data, whether it's light, shadow, or just the physical feeling of the eyes being open creates enough external noise to deter the internal burglars.
The burglars being your intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, your regrets about yesterday, your stress about tomorrow, the radio keeps them out.
It creates a rigid boundary between consciousness and the subconscious dream state. But, as Osman discovered, this rigid boundary comes with a severe biological cost.
The friction. I mean, why didn't he just keep doing this for 44 years if it caused such a massive leap forward?
Well, the human autonomic nervous system is designed with specific imperatives.
Right.
When you attempt to enter a state of deep physical relaxation, lowering your heart rate, lowering your respiratory rate, the body naturally initiates the sequence for rest.
And step one of that sequence is closing the eyes.
Exactly, to protect the cornea and conserve energy. So by forcing your eyes to stay wide open while simultaneously trying to relax your body, you are creating a massive biological paradox.
You're stepping on the gas and the brake at the exact same time.
Precisely, and the body will always rebel against that paradox. Osman points out the literal physical toll. The eyes begin to strain. They require constant conscious blinking.
Yeah.
And eventually the corneas begin to dry out and the eyeballs physically burn.
Anyone who's ever gotten into a staring contest knows that exact burning sensation. It is pure agony.
It becomes a battle of pure physical endurance. And the moment your practice shifts from mental focus to pain management, the meditation is completely over.
Yeah, your brain's alarm system is just going off.
The amygdala starts firing, signaling, hey, our eyes are drying out, this is a threat, we need to move, we need to act. You are no longer cultivating peace, you are just enduring self-inflicted torture.
So the radio in the living room is suddenly blaring at maximum volume, and the house is on fire.
That's one way to put it.
The physical discomfort completely shatters the mental clarity. And if fighting the body's urge to close the eyes causes a burning sensation that ruins the focus, the most logical, obvious solution in the world is to simply shut them.
Right.
Which brings us to the second extreme, and really the absolute darling of the modern wellness community.
Closed-eye mindfulness meditation. Specifically, the practice of sitting with the eyes completely shut and observing the rhythm of the breath.
Now, Osman is incredibly fair to this method in the source text.
He really is.
He acknowledges that it's the undisputed champion of the scientific community. It has mountains of peer-reviewed evidence backing its benefits for stress reduction and neuroplasticity.
And as we mentioned earlier, this is the very method he recommends to his thousands of students because it's safe and it delivers massive results.
Right. It solves the burning eye problem instantly. By closing the eyelids, you remove the physical friction, the corneas are protected, the muscles relax, and you send a clear, unambiguous signal to the parasympathetic nervous system that it is safe to downregulate.
And you use the breath as a constant internal metronome to keep time.
But despite all the science, and despite teaching it to thousands of people, Osman personally rejects it for his own practice.
Yeah, he states that no matter how many times he tried it over the years, it simply did not suit his personality, and he found no intrinsic value in it.
His critique of the closed eye method is where we really start to see the depth of his understanding of neurobiology.
Oh, absolutely.
He warns that when you close your eyes completely, you isolate your consciousness entirely. You place yourself, in his words, 100% in the imagination world.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah, right.
Isn't going into your imagination, like going inward, shutting out the noisy world, the entire goal of a spiritual or meditative practice? Why is he framing the imagination as a negative thing?
That is a vital distinction
Yeah.
that the modern mindfulness movement often fails to explain properly.
Okay.
We had to separate the concept of meditation, which is the cultivation of a single-pointed, highly conscious focus, from the concept of daydreaming.
Ah.
Daydreaming is the chaotic, undirected wandering of the mind.
Focus versus wandering. Okay, let's look at the neuroscience of that. When you close your eyes, you deprive the brain of its primary source of spatial and sensory orientation.
Right.
In the absence of external tasks or visual friction, the brain's default mode network, or the DMN, powers up.
The DMN, the neurological seat of our internal monologue.
Exactly. Evolutionarily, the DMN is designed to run simulations.
Simulations? Like what?
Well, when we aren't actively hunting or gathering, the brain uses that downtime to analyze past social interactions to avoid future mistakes. Or it plans for potential future threats.
Oh, right.
It's a survival mechanism. But during meditation, it is your worst enemy.
Because the moment the eyes close and the room disappears, the DMN just hijacks the wheel.
Yeah.
You sit down to focus on your breathing, and within 45 seconds, the imagination world takes over. You are vividly simulating an argument with your boss, or you're stressing about a car repair.
You're completely lost in a mental theater of your own creation.
Osman specifically notes that in this completely closed-off state, the mind wanders wildly and, quote, imagination plays tricks.
The lack of an external anchor makes the internal simulations feel incredibly real and incredibly sticky. You just get pulled into the narrative of your thoughts.
And there's a second, equally disastrous biological consequence of closing your eyes that he highlights.
The sleep trigger.
Right. He actually calls it dangerous in the context of trying to maintain awareness, because it is dangerously easy to just nod off.
The architecture of human sleep is deeply tied to light exposure. When you shut your eyes completely, the pineal gland registers the darkness.
Okay.
Combined with a relaxed physical posture and deep breathing, the brain receives the classic cocktail of biological cues to release melatonin and transition right into the early stages of sleep.
And sleep is the exact opposite of meditation. Sleep is unconscious rest. Meditation is hyperconscious presence.
So if you're practicing the closed eye method, you are constantly fighting a two-front war.
How so?
Well, on one side, you're fighting the gravitational pull of the default mode network, dragging you into anxious daydreams. And on the other side, you're fighting the biological tide of melatonin, pulling you into unconscious sleep.
Man, that is exhausting. You're just bouncing between vivid distraction and groggy lethargy. So let's look at the map we've drawn so far. It feels like we are completely trapped. If we keep our eyes open, we anchor ourselves to reality. But our corneas burn, and the physical pain shatters our focus.
And if we close our eyes, we fix the pain, but we drown in the imagination world or we simply fall asleep.
It presents itself as an impossible binary. You either suffer physically or you wander mentally.
But this is where those decades of relentless experimentation pay off. Osman didn't accept the binary. He spent years looking for a biological loophole.
And he found the clutch.
He found the exact mechanical middle ground.
This brings us to his ultimate personal go-to technique, the method he actually practices when the doors are closed. I like to call it the Goldilocks gaze.
The Goldilocks gaze.
Yeah. He reveals that the secret isn't open or closed. It's the half-closed eye method. Specifically, he states that he keeps his eyelids exactly 80% closed.
80%. I mean, the precision of that metric is fascinating. It implies a highly dialed-in physical awareness.
Oh, yeah.
And he pairs this 80% closure with a very specific visual and muscular target. He instructs the practitioner to figuratively look downward toward the tip of the nose, focusing on an area about 1 foot away from the face.
Okay, we need to dissect the physical mechanics of this incredibly carefully, because I guarantee someone listening to us right now just tried this, literally crossed their eyes to stare at the bridge of their own nose, and is currently giving themselves a massive migraine.
And Osman explicitly anticipates that exact error. He warns that many people complain about eye strain and pain when they attempt this.
Right.
He is adamant that if your eyes hurt, you are fundamentally misunderstanding the geometry. You are not supposed to literally cross your optic nerves to stare at your physical cartilage.
He describes looking at the nose not as a literal target, but as a directional goal.
It's a vector. You're dropping the angle of your gaze. You're looking downward and slightly outward into that empty space about a foot in front of you.
Okay.
The goal, as he defines it, is to create a gentle stretch of the eye muscles. It should be entirely devoid of strain.
I want to go back to the tightrope walker analogy to really make this visual for you.
Go for it.
Imagine you're walking a 2-inch wire suspended 100 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Where do your eyes go? If you look straight down at your own shoes, which is the equivalent of crossing your eyes to stare at your literal nose, you lose all depth perception.
You get dizzy.
Right, the environment spins and you fall off the rope. That is the eye strain.
It's too localized. It creates tension.
Exactly. But if you look way up at the sky or you close your eyes completely, which is entering the imagination world, you lose your spatial awareness entirely. You lose your relationship to the rope and you fall.
That's the closed eye trap. The default mode network takes over.
Exactly. To survive the tightrope, you have to find the Goldilocks zone. You maintain a soft, unfocused gaze just a few feet ahead of you on the rope. You're looking downward but forward.
Right.
You are visually aware of the rope anchoring you to reality, but you aren't obsessing over the individual threads of the fiber. That soft downward-forward gaze is the mechanical secret to perfect balance.
That is a brilliant translation of the biology at play here. Let's run the diagnostic on Osman's 80% J's and see how elegantly it solves the biological paradoxes we established earlier.
Let's start with the burning eyes from the first extreme.
Okay, so by allowing the eyelids to close 80% of the way, you are letting the eyelid perform its evolutionary function. It is covering the vast majority of the cornea.
Trapping the moisture.
Yes. It prevents the rapid evaporation of tears that causes that burning sensation.
So the physical friction is eliminated, the endurance battle is over, you don't have to constantly fight the urge to blink.
Precisely. Now, we evaluate the problems of the closed eye method, the imagination world, and the sleep trigger. Because the eyelids are still 20% open, a sliver of ambient light and a blurred, soft focus impression of the physical environment continues to bleed into the visual cortex.
What's the ultimate biological hack? It provides just enough sensory data to keep the brain tethered to the physical room.
Yes.
The brain says, okay, light is coming in, we are anchored to this location. That tiny stream of data is enough to suppress the default mode network. The imagination world is kept locked behind the door.
Furthermore, because photons are still hitting the retina, the pineal gland does not receive the signal to flood the brain with melatonin. The circadian clock recognizes that you are still awake.
You have successfully threaded the needle. You've bypassed the painful alertness of the open eye, and you've bypassed the chaotic slumber of the closed eye. You are physically anchored, but biologically relaxed.
But this is where the source material moves from clever physiological hacking into really profound neurological territory.
Oh, yeah?
This 80% posture isn't just about avoiding dry eyes or staying awake. According to Osman, this precise physical geometry is the mechanical key that unlocks a massive shift in brainwave states.
This is the core of his decades of practice. He details the mechanics of what he calls the pull. He states that when he achieves this gentle downward stretch of the eye muscles, he physically feels a pulling sensation that activates what he refers to as the third eye region.
To keep this grounded in the physiological terms we've been using, he's referring to the frontal lobe and the energetic centers associated with the space between the brows.
Right.
In traditional meditation sciences, this region is considered the master control point that organizes the rest of the nervous system.
He calls it the principal point that pulls all the other centers into alignment. And the result of this activation is just staggering. He claims that he achieves a state of one-pointedness, absolute undivided focus gently without forcing the mind.
Yes.
And he enters a deeply peaceful theta state almost instantaneously.
The time frame he provides is what really demands our attention. He says this profound state of peace envelops him within a split second to 2 seconds.
1 to 2 seconds. I mean, for context, hitting a sustained theta brainwave state, which is that incredibly deep, lucid, dreamlike state you normally only experience right on the absolute edge of falling asleep, or in the deepest moments of a flow state that usually takes an experienced practitioner 20 to 30 minutes of rigorous breath work to achieve.
At least.
Suggesting that a microscopic muscle stretch in the eye can trigger a theta state in 1 second sounds like science fiction. How is that biologically possible?
It becomes entirely possible when you view it through the lens of classical conditioning and physiological biofeedback.
Okay, explain that.
We have to remember the context of the practitioner. Osman hasn't been doing this for a week. He's spent over 4 decades, going on 5, meticulously conditioning his nervous system.
The infrastructure is built.
Exactly. He has trained his neurobiology so thoroughly that this specific 80% closed, gentle downward gaze acts as a master neurological switch.
A physical switch.
The human brain is an association machine. Over thousands of hours of practice, his brain has physically hardwired the exact proprioceptive feeling of that subtle eye stretch to the immediate cessation of the waking, anxious beta brainwave state.
And the immediate onset of the restorative theta state.
Yes. He actually proves this in the transcript. He explicitly states that if he attempts to meditate with his eyes fully closed or fully open, he is, quote, not there.
If he just sits down and tries to focus on his breathing like a beginner, he's not there. The magic doesn't happen.
It is only the precise physical geometry of the 80% gaze that triggers the instantaneous drop into peace.
Which is a profound testament to state-dependent memory anchored in the physical body.
It really is.
The mind doesn't just remember the state of peace abstractly. It remembers the state of peace based on the posture of the musculature. The stretch of that specific extraocular muscle is the literal physical key turning in the lock of his nervous system. And because that lock has been oiled and turned tens of thousands of times over all these years, the door to the theta state swings open the millisecond the key is inserted.
This completely flips the conventional wisdom of the mind-body connection upside down.
How so?
Well, we're always taught that mental states have to be willed into existence from the top down. We're told, change your thoughts and your body will relax. Think positive and your heart rate will drop. We treat the mind as the master and the body as the servant.
Oh man, that is so true. But Osman's mechanics prove that mental states can be aggressively and reliably reverse-engineered from the bottom up.
You don't have to think your way into a new physical reality. You can physically act your way into a new mental reality.
By simply adjusting the mechanical angle of a 2 mm piece of skin over your eyes, you can forcefully hijack the brain's operating system and command it to shut down the anxiety programs.
The physical posture dictates the mental state, not the other way around.
That is just an incredibly empowering realization for anyone who has ever felt like they were failing at meditation because their mind was too busy. Your mind isn't the problem. Your geometry is just slightly off.
Exactly.
As we pull all of these threads together, let's look at the incredible arc of this journey. We started by diagnosing the failure of the extremes, the burning, painful reality of the open eye method, a brilliant anchor to reality, but ultimately a doomed battle of physical endurance against our own autonomic nervous system.
Which naturally drove us to the opposite extreme. The chaotic theater of the closed eye method,
Right.
the darling of modern science that, while safe and effective for beginners building infrastructure, ultimately leaves the practitioner fighting the dual gravity of the default mode network's daydreams and the biological inevitability of sleep.
And finally, guided by decades of global observation, we arrived at the masterful middle path, the Goldilocks gaze, the 80% closed eyelid paired with a soft downward focus 1 foot away.
A physical geometry that protects the cornea, suppresses the imagination world, and acts as a conditioned master switch to pull the central nervous system gently into a profound theta state in mere seconds.
It is the perfect synthesis of anatomy and awareness.
No.
Now, Osman is incredibly clear that his insights are meant to help you find the method that suits your specific personality and biological makeup.
Right, there's no one-size-fits-all.
Exactly. The goal is to achieve that one-pointedness gently without grinding the gears. And for those who want to explore his methodologies further, especially regarding how these techniques can be integrated into daily life, he directs listeners to visit his website at yogawellness786.com.
And he actually offers a free 5-minute yoga and meditation program there that you can download to start building your own infrastructure.
Yeah, which is a great place to start. Plus, his podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you search for his channel. But I think the overarching lesson he provides is that the physical body and the mental landscape are not two separate, isolated domains.
No, they are a single, continuous, highly responsive biological loop.
Which leaves me with a final, provocative thought for you to carry into your day. Osman proved, through decades of meticulous refinement, that changing the physical angle of his eyelids by a mere 20% is the exact mechanical difference between a chaotic, wandering mind and an instantaneous state of profound, life-altering peace.
A tiny, almost imperceptible shift in physical tension.
Exactly. So I ask you, if such a microscopic, easily ignored physical adjustment can completely alter a person's neurological reality in less than 2 seconds, what other tiny, unnoticed physical habits are you holding in your body right now? What are you doing with the tension in your jaw as you listen to this? How shallow is the breathing in your chest? How are you holding your shoulders? What microscopic physical geometries are you currently maintaining that are secretly, quietly dictating the chaotic state of your mind?
It makes you realize that peace might not be a thought you have to find, but a posture you have to remember.
Well said. Until next time, keep exploring the hidden mechanics of your own mind. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.